Hi, this is Christopher Smith, publisher of the American Cannabis Report. And today I'm extremely fortunate to have Mary Bailey, who's on the founding team of the Last Prisoner Project. So hi, Mary. One of the first things I'd love to know is how you got into the business. How did you get into the cannabis industry of all the things you could do from your background and where you are and everything, where you started? How did you actually make the decision to start and really commit your life to the cannabis industry?
Yes, so I have been in and around the cannabis industry for 20 years now. And, moving from the underground cannabis world into the above ground cannabis world a couple years ago, I host a cannabis conference on the island of Maui Cannabis Conference. And working, with the cannabis world here in Hawaii, it's been, very interesting watching everything go from medical, and we're working towards recreational legislation. So that's kind of what led me to being one of the founders of Last Prisoner Project.
Hawaii has had the worst time, it seems to me, with getting through legalization. I can't quite understand what, I mean, especially Hawaii, with such a sort of a famed legacy background. It's such a great opportunity. It must be so frustrating.
It really comes down to our current governor, Governor Ige, is incredibly conservative. And so most people wouldn't think that the state of Hawaii would be conservative. And so you'd think it would be recreational legislation, not a problem. But he's put quite a wrench in things moving forward in that way. But his term is almost done. And I have a feeling like that the next person coming into office will see the benefits of opening up, legalization for cannabis, both financially and just healthfully in general, as a plant medicine that really adds a high quality of life for people. So, I think that things will be moving forward sooner than later.
Oh, good. And to stop the stigma, of course, and to stop the people being incarcerated for a plant, which I think gets us maybe right. I think that might be a nice little tie-in to where you are. So you were the co-founder of the Last Prisoner Project.
Yeah, so I was one of two first founding staff members of the org. We have three amazing official co-founders, which would be Dean Reyes, who comes from the cannabis industry, and he's also a C3 manager of the reggae band Revolution. Andrew D'Angelo and his brother Steve D'Angelo, of course, from the original Discovery show Weed Wars and the dispensary Harborside. Sure.
Well, I'm sorry if I got that wrong about your participation early on. Apologize for that.
Oh, no, you're right. I am a co-founder. I mean, a co-founding staff member. Absolutely. Okay. So that was totally correct.
Excellent. Okay. Well, anyway, yay for me. I guess I got something right. I first heard really about Last Prisoner Project. I'm on a news show called the State of Cannabis News Hour. And I did a show or an episode, really, a story about this brand that I'd heard about, a new brand called Evidence. And Evidence is one of the brands from, I'm looking at my notes here, Ocean Grown Extracts, and was able to talk to Casey Dalton for a while and talk about that project that they have in the prison.
Yeah, so first of all, in my eyes, Casey Dalton is an absolute angel. She and her brother, Dan Dalton, have been supporters literally since day one of our organization. Right. When we founded Last Prisoner Project, Dan was one of the very first introductions that Steve D'Angelo made with me, and he's been on board ever since. They have gone above and beyond to really support our efforts. They created the Evidence brand. Partial proceeds from that brand go towards the work that we do as an organization. Of course, they also work very closely with Damian Marley, who is one of our ambassadors and sits on our advisory board. So, working with the Marley family, it's all very helpful in propelling the mission forward. And it's a mission that Evidence, with Amy and Dan in the lead, they feel very strongly and go above and beyond to support in the ways that they can, as does Damian.
I think they're really terrific. Having met Casey that one time, I mean, her commitment is so immediate. It's just right out there, you know, and it's so genuine. She's really pretty fantastic.
Yeah, she really is. And it was actually really nice. I was in Santa Barbara recently for the Santa Barbara Film Fest. One of our constituents, Michael Thompson, was releasing a mini documentary film premiere was at Santa Barbara Film Fest. And so Casey Dalton and Dan Dalton were present, and it was really just nice for them to get to be a part of, you know, such an exciting event. Them getting to meet Michael Thompson live and in person after advocating for his release for quite so long. And it was just, it's always nice after a 2-year pandemic of actually getting to spend time with our partners and our supporters and our constituents in person after so many phone calls and video calls over the years.
Yeah, I'll say, well, congratulations, by the way, on that success. That's wonderful. So I think I should probably just take a second in case, I don't know how this is possible, but just in case someone hasn't heard of the Last Prisoner Project or doesn't really know all that you do, I would love to hear from you what the Last Prisoner Project is designed to do. What was the need that you were filling by doing this? And what are some of the initiatives that you guys are working on?
Absolutely. So in a nutshell, we as an organization feel that it's an absolute travesty that there are still tens of thousands of people who are currently incarcerated for cannabis here in America. It's, you know, it's devastating to think about all of those families who are basically torn apart due to the criminalization of cannabis. And even though cannabis has been deemed an essential business during a global crisis, those folks are still, you know, separated from their families. Life in prison is harder now than it ever has been before because of COVID. And, you know, a lot of the people that we work with who are currently incarcerated, they're on, some of them, up to 23 hours a day lockdown, which means that they cannot get out and, you know, just see the light of day, basically. So we as an org, we formed the org to come together to create solutions for this. We are absolutely dedicated to helping right the wrongs of the criminalization of cannabis and help people who are currently incarcerated. So our main goal is to help find full freedom of people who are currently incarcerated, and then also help them rebuild their lives once they're released. We realize that helping people regain their much deserved freedom is only half the job. And so getting your life back on track, having a felony on your record is incredibly difficult. So we've set up programs to help through our reentry program as well.
You know, one of the big things I know that you're also working on is, I think that just that awful word, I mean, just that as a word, expungement, which sounds sort of awkward and funny, but let's talk for a minute about expungement of criminal records and why that's so important.
Well, there's a lot. And when you talk about expungement, it's actually what we focus on is more clemency, so release efforts.
Yeah.
So when we've created our programs, we have a legal program. So what we've created is we match pro bono attorneys with currently incarcerated cannabis prisoners. Those pro bono attorneys help those prisoners file their clemency petitions and compassionate release petitions. Those are the two main mechanisms that we've seen success in helping people regain their freedom. When it comes to the term expungement, that actually means that once people are free, that those criminal records are dropped. And so we call that full freedom. So not only helping, you know, those mechanisms, the clemency mechanism to get them out of prison, but also incorporating expungement, which is more of a record clearing effort.
Right. And sorry, pardon me for interrupting. My understanding really is, you know, why expungement matters is when you go to apply for jobs, if you go to buy a home, for example, all of having a record like that will pretty much prohibit you from getting back into a normal lifestyle, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the consequences that come along with a cannabis conviction are intense. It affects your ability to even rent an apartment in some places, get student loans, you know, food stamps if you need that kind of support. I mean, it's just really, really detrimental to helping people really rebuild their lives. So expungement is incredibly important. Record clearance. We have a campaign that will be coming up later this year where we really focus on record clearance and really educating the public on the importance of record clearance in general. Recently, our policy team helped sponsor a bill in California specifically that is all for record clearance and expungement. A few years ago, there was a big announcement that many records in the state of California would be expunged, but there was not an effort for checks and balances to make sure that that was happening. And so that's where this bill comes in, and it is sponsored by Last Prisoner Project to really make sure that that work is being done and that there is a functional mechanism for those records to be expunged.
And I understand too that the prisoners themselves are charged sometimes, and depending on the jurisdiction, they're charged quite a bit of money to access the records, review the records, and then push them out, and get those things reversed, and or as you're saying, I think in a better way, records clearance. So it costs a lot of money, and let's talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, it is, but I mean, in general, Last Prisoner Project, we do not host expungement clinics. There are other orgs in the cannabis industry that focus on that. We as an org, we really strive to stay in our lane. So we really focus on release efforts through clemency and compassionate release. And then we offer grants to individuals as they return to society through our reentry program. So those are our two main focuses. When it comes to reentry, we have, when we were building the org, we did a needs assessment. What do people really need as they're getting released? What do families need when they have a loved one who's incarcerated for cannabis? And it's always funding. They need help funding, keeping the lights on, buying groceries. So what we've created is through our reentry program is a grant system. Since we started this program, we have dispersed over $750,000 in grants. Those are to directly impacted folks.
Wow.
Put funding onto the commissary accounts of people who are currently incarcerated. We also have a family support fund. So most of the prisoners that I work with, most of them are parents. Some of them have upwards of 4 or 5 children. And so now those children are now living in single parent households. With our grant program, anybody who has a parent who is currently incarcerated, that means that they are eligible for our grants. So all they have to do is go to our website, they go to our reentry resource page, and they can apply for a grant right on our website. We also, of course, have grants for returning citizens. So when people are getting out of prison, they also are eligible absolutely for grants to help them get back on their feet. Other people that are eligible for grants are people that have been released for quite some time. It doesn't matter how long they've been out. If anybody has a cannabis offense on their record, they are absolutely eligible to apply for our grants.
I've heard a lot of people call, and this may, in the mainstream, I think is probably not really thought about very much, but in a lot of ways, people, if the government has declared a war on drugs, then a lot of these people are prisoners of war, really, and they've been unfairly incarcerated. And then when they get out, that the records problem, leads to literally a lifetime of problems. So the way that you guys are thoughtfully thinking through this problem is really impressive, actually. So
thank you for saying that. Yeah, and it's the term that we use are the collateral consequences of a cannabis offense, and it really creates a ripple effect of trauma throughout the entire family. And for anybody that doesn't have anybody in their family that has gone to prison, what I've seen and what I've been learning is that when one person goes to prison, the entire family goes to prison in one way or another. And it's so incredibly expensive to actually be incarcerated. you want to keep in touch with your family through phone calls or emails or video calls, it all costs money. And it's actually quite expensive. One of the families that I work with from New Jersey, they're paying upwards of $80 to $100 every week just for phone calls. And so that really adds up very fast. And of course, if it's one of the breadwinners of the family is now incarcerated for cannabis, that again, it leaves that single parent household, and it adds a lot of stress to a family union.
Well, shame on the prison system for creating a profit center out of people's pain and the simple issue of a phone call, which everybody else in the world knows is virtually free at this time. So shame on them for that.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, in terms of my understanding of what you all do, Mary, a second story that I was able to research because it came up, sort of popped up on my newsfeed, was about a guy named Kevin Allen. And I know he's featured now on your site. And I think what's interesting about Kevin Allen is I think that he really represents so clearly, so simple in the one individual, all the problems that you guys are facing. Would you tell me a little bit more about Kevin Allen and tell me about his case? Tell me about what he's in jail for. Tell me about all that, because I think he's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a nutshell, Kevin Allen is serving a life sentence in prison for the sale of only $20 of cannabis. It's such a travesty. So I feel that it's important to state, this was a third strike situation. Both of his other charges were nonviolent charges, drug-related charges. There's no reason for him to be behind prison with no option of parole for $20 of cannabis. So,
and we know that the three strikes has been proven unconstitutional already. So on its face, it's illegitimate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, this is the third case in the state of Louisiana that I'm aware of that somebody received a life sentence for under $20 worth of cannabis. It's heartbreaking, really. So we are calling upon the public to reach out, to call and email the DA. His name is DA Marvin in the state of Louisiana, to really put pressure on his office to release Kevin Allen. There's a newly enacted law in Louisiana that provides an avenue to kind of remedy the situation and work with the district attorney's office. And it's a post-conviction plea agreement is the goal here. So we've been, working with different supporters across the country and different media sources to really try to shine a light on Kevin's story. Recently there was a lot of attention on Gary Chambers Jr., who's running for office in the state of Louisiana. And so he's really, really taking a focus of a lot of his public talks to really feature Kevin Allen and the detrimental effects of the criminalization of cannabis in Louisiana and other places across the country, of, what's really happening, how it's affecting families. We really appreciate him for using his platform to really shine a light on this case.
Well, despite the fact that, you have the one issue of just the optics, just what a bad look it is for a Confederate state to have locked up a black man for his entire life for $20 worth of weed. Just you put those three things together and it just sort of turns your stomach. And it makes me just really question their human values, honestly. It's awful.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's hard to imagine, how you can't hear a story like that and want to do something about it. And there's so many others too. And for anybody that is interested in getting behind this, it's very simple. If you go to the Last Prisoner Project website, which is lastprisonerproject.org, at the top, you'll see a page called Take Action. So click on the Take Action page. That is the best kind of one-stop shop to be able to get behind all of the campaigns that we're working on. And so the one currently at the top of the page is the Kevin Allen campaign. As you go down, you can learn about other campaigns that we're currently hosting. We've got a campaign of New Jersey cannabis clemency campaign, where we're calling upon Governor Murphy to release all cannabis prisoners in the state of New Jersey. There are many people, unfortunately, incarcerated for cannabis in the state of New Jersey, even though they've passed, recreational legislation there.
Well, I'm in California, and I know we've got a terrible problem, and it seems in California that the problem is local, really. Like some jurisdictions have released 0 prisoners, and some are almost cleared the deck. So it really seems to be a personal values or some kind of political expediency or whatever. But it's really localized for whatever reason. But is that sometimes in a whole state like New Jersey? I guess this is happening, right?
Well, I think the thing is that most people assume that when a state passes legalization legislation for cannabis, that people are automatically released. And so it's really important that we as an org educate the public of that is actually not happening. There are many people incarcerated in every state across the country for cannabis, unfortunately. And so that is why we create these awareness campaigns and really, amplifying the stories of families who have been negatively impacted. For example, Humberto Ramirez, he's one of the prisoners that we really highlight when we're talking about the New Jersey campaign. He was a dedicated father, dedicated family man. His family needs him at home. His wife, Brooke, is really, they need him home. And so by sharing their story and Brooke's story and really just highlighting how families are really being ripped apart by the criminalization of cannabis, it's a way of really helping people understand why it's so important to sign petitions, to send letters to legislators. It's beyond just donating, here and there. It's really just, there are action steps that we can all take that is really just by the click of your mouse and by sending letters, it really does help. So we try to make it as simple as we can as an organization for people to step up and support in their own ways. So on that Take Action page, each one of the campaigns has its own landing page. So you go to that landing page and we have different calls to action. So we actually have sample copy. You can literally cut and paste and press a button and you can send an email to a legislator. We try to make it, again, as simple as possible. We also have social media graphics. So people can actually use their platform to share information. And that is, again, it creates that ripple effect of awareness across in so many different directions. And so by sharing, we have sample copy for those social media posts as well. So that is another way that people can get on board by using their social media platforms.
Well, I can tell you just from my own personal experience now, everything that you've just described is exactly as you described. It is easy. It's one click. I've done all of this. I've sent all the emails. You have the text for the email. All you have to do is put in the person's name, whether it's DA Marvin or Assistant DA Andrew Jacobs. This is all about Kevin Allen, for example, in Louisiana. But you provided all the text. You provided the citation and the legal text, etc. It's just copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. It took me probably 10 minutes to send 5-6 emails, to post it on my social media and to get other people to share it to free Kevin Allen. So all I'm just trying to confirm that everything you're saying is absolutely copy and paste, easy to do. And people can do this with barely any effort at all and hopefully make a difference for this guy and
Absolutely.
others.
And thank you for taking the time. It's really great to hear that your experience was smooth and easy and getting involved and taking part in those call to action. So thank you. One of the other, ways that people can really support that I'd like to talk about is the importance of sending letters to people who are currently incarcerated. It's incredible. Before I really got into this work, I didn't realize how important that was. But as I've worked with people who are currently incarcerated and now speaking with them, that those that have found their freedom and are out living their life, they tell me that receiving letters when they were incarcerated from people on the outside, these are reminders that they have not been forgotten. to know that there are people on the outside fighting for their freedom, that they've told me that those efforts were monumental and making them know that they matter, that their story matters, that there are people fighting for their freedom, and it gave them the hope that they needed to keep going. So just wanted to mention that as well.
That's really great. Now, I'm just looking at Kevin's page now. Is some kind of contact available for him also? I see the hashtag, of course, Free Kevin Allen, things like that. How could we get in touch directly with Kevin, for example?
Yes, absolutely. So we do have a page. We have a letter writing campaign page on our website.
Oh, got it.
You also can get there from the Take Action page. It's located a couple places around the website just to make it really easy for people to find. But so what we have is, once you find the letter writing campaign page, we actually have a letter writing guide. And so you can either send, and I highly suggest for people to actually do it via snail mail if they're open to it. Because when a prison, unfortunately, prisons are very dangerous places. When anything happens in a prison and they go on what's called lockdown, that means that people are stuck in their cells and they have no way to receive or send an email or phone call, whereas they can still receive snail mail. So once you do find the letter writing campaign page on our website, you'll see a digital letter writing guide. And we actually have profiles of, I think there's upwards of 100 prisoners on there right now. And so if we have photos, the photos are listed. We don't have photos for everybody, but we do have profiles. And so you can read a little bit about them. Even some of them are profiles that were written by the prisoner themselves. So you can understand a little bit about where they're coming from, a little bit of their story, and really just, you can write about anything, just to start a conversation. You can write about, your hobbies, where you're located, and just making sure that they know that they have not been forgotten is the main part.
That's a really, really great idea. I'm looking at it's under the partners. The top level of navigation is partners, and then under that is letter writing program. That's where you'll find all that information. That's for anyone who's not looking at the website while we're talking. This is where you find it. So
wonderful.
Again, it's just easy to do. Again, what I like so much about what you're doing, honestly, Mary, is that it's not only is it very thoughtful, but that you've thought through every little thing like this, and then you make it easy for people to actually participate. You just don't point a finger at them and say, "Go write these people." You give them, here's their address, here's what to say. You make it very, very easy to do something really meaningful for these folks.
Well, that's the goal, because I feel it's important that if this cause touches your heart and you want to get behind it, it's up to us as an org to make sure that people know that they can be an advocate, and to make it as easy as possible for them to be an advocate. And then, the other part of my job is to really inspire the cannabis industry and cannabis leaders to step up and support this work. So that's another area that we've really worked hard to create partnership opportunities for brands. We have a program called Partners for Freedom, which there are different corporate incentives for different levels of donations. So any corporate partners that are interested in learning more, they can go to the website, go to the partners page, fill out a simple form, and they'll automatically receive information for that as well.
Yeah. Now, just to be clear again, where we started talking about the scope of this project, or the scope of the problem, really, right? Which is that the estimate I think that you guys give is that there are 40,000 prisoners like this in the United States still, right? 40,000, right?
Well, at least 40,000. And so we've even started to step away from using the number 40,000, and we say tens of thousands, because it's a sad thing to say, but our system is absolutely archaic. And it's so difficult to know exactly how many people are even incarcerated for cannabis in America. For example, when we learned how many people are incarcerated for cannabis just in the state of Colorado, we actually had to go through the governor's office, then through the Department of Corrections, in order to extrapolate that data. And that's just in one state. And so you would have to go through and be able to do that in all the different states. And then that's not even counting at the local level, people who are incarcerated for cannabis offenses, or people who maybe were on probation for one thing or another and might have failed a drug test due to testing positive for cannabis. So those numbers would not show up as well. And then, of course, the federal data on how many people are federally incarcerated for cannabis or cannabis-related charges is a whole nother bucket of folks that would count towards that number. So again, the number is very high. And because our justice system is, it's really tough to even get exact data on those numbers yet.
So tens of thousands of people, and these are in the state prison system. This is just what you and I have been talking about. Just
state and federal.
State and federal, right? All across the nation. And what's important to communicate is that these aren't people that just you and I think ought to be out. In a lot of these states, these people are actually by law supposed to be out. The law released them already, and the apparatus is too slow. A lot of these people are just stuck under the bureaucracy, right?
I can't speak on that. Most states have not passed any retroactive relief legislation that would allow.
Okay.
Now, that is a misconception actually in the industry that states did pass. I'm not necessarily saying that people should be released because of laws that have been enacted. But what we are saying is that any state who has passed cannabis legislation, that they should create, whether it's bills or just policy in general, that focuses on retroactive relief. And that's something that we really focus on as an org. We have an incredible policy team that's been working towards retroactive relief, which really means resentencing. For example, we recently sponsored a bill in the state of Virginia. It was a strict resentencing bill. They recently passed recreational legislation, but yet it didn't focus on the folks who are currently incarcerated for cannabis. It didn't take them into thought of, now that it's practically legal, how are they going to be returning home to their families? So that's something that we've been working on. Unfortunately, that bill did not make it through, but we will reintroduce something similar next year when we have the opportunity.
All right, so thank you for correcting me, first of all. I'm sitting here thinking, well, no, the misconception has reached me and it got into my head too. And I was wrong about that. So I'm so grateful that you clarified that. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure. Like I mentioned earlier, it's very common for people to assume that this kind of, release efforts should automatically be built into this, legislation, and the fact that it really hasn't is something that we really try to shine a light on.
Right. Now, is there recently we heard that the MORE Act is going to be voted on again. I think this week, perhaps they're talking about voting on it again in Congress. And what people say is the MORE Act is a little different than other legislations. Is there anything in the MORE Act particularly that talks about release of prisoners and that kind of thing? Is there anything in there?
There are some statements along those lines, but to be honest, I would prefer that a member of our policy team were to speak on the specifics. Yeah,
well, that's going to be a federal level legislation, which wouldn't necessarily handle the state situation. So, Mary, I so appreciate all your time today. I know you're so busy, and there's so many people probably calling you all the way through this interview trying to get your attention, I'm sure. But I just wanted to ask you one more, I think, just very generally, which is there anything that I forgot to ask or didn't remember to ask, didn't know to ask you that you'd like to talk about? Oh, well, first of all, I just really appreciate the invitation to have this conversation with you. So I wanted to say thank you first. And thank you for asking if there's anything else. I would say a way that people can really get behind it that is really simple, and most people don't realize how impactful it really is. It could be as simple as, if you're not following Last Prisoner Project on social media, which would be Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, I feel like there's one more, but it's escaping me. But to really follow us on socials, and any posts that really resonate with you, to reshare them.
And again, it creates that ripple effect of awareness. And it's one way to use your own platform, not only to educate yourself, but to your friends, families, and colleagues. So that is one way that people can really support the, all of our efforts without really having to do much more than, use your cell phone.
It's very simple, and I mean it sincerely. When it was suggested about how simple it would be to write an email campaign in support of Kevin Allen, even he's just one of the many that you have. It was super simple to do. So I appreciate you guys for organizing things in such a comprehensive and simple way to make it easy to take action. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to share more information.
I want to thank you again, Mary Bailey, for representing the Last Prisoner Project so well and for giving us so much of your time today. I know you've got a lot of stuff going on, so I really appreciate that. I want to remind our viewers to like, share, and subscribe the video, and also give a special thanks and shout out to Dan and Jimmy and Isabel over at Pro Cannabis Media for all their support. Thank you.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.